Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Throughout the day, heavy rain will fall on the southwest part of the province as an atmospheric river hits the lower mainland and Vancouver Island. That means a risk of flooding and landslides, bringing to mind 2021's atmospheric river events. We'll hear what things are like in the Fraser Valley, and you can call us with your questions. After 12:30, coping with grief during the holidays. It can sometimes be overlooked as the busy season kicks off, but we'll make space and ask what supports can help. I'm Michelle Eliot. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1 and live streaming on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and you can use the CBC News app. The South Coast is experiencing a double whammy for weather today. There are elevated tides as well as an atmospheric river. As you heard in the news, a portion of Highway 1 through the Fraser Canyon will be temporarily closed tonight, and that's due to heavy rain and possibly snow. The province says that decision stems from concerns around unstable ground impacted by the Cook Peak Creek wildfire this past summer. Now, the highway will be closed at 7 p.m., about 9 kilometers south of Lytton, and a decision will be made tomorrow about when to reopen it. Environment Canada has issued rainfall warnings and higher than normal ocean water levels for the Saanich Peninsula, the Southern Gulf Islands, and parts of Metro Vancouver for today. There's also a high stream low advisory from the BC Rivers Forecast Centre. We'll be joined by our climate and science specialist Darius Madavi in a moment to explain all of this and what we can look at for the coming days. We're asking you, what are you experiencing right now? What are you seeing out there? I can see it is very gray and rain falling here in downtown Vancouver. And asking you as well, what are you doing to prepare? What are your own questions about atmospheric rivers and what we can expect? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone, and by email, send us your thoughts, your questions, bctoday@cbc.ca. If you've taken any photos today at all, perhaps you're out and about and have just taken a photo of what you're seeing, you can certainly send them to us as well. Well, we all remember how hard the Fraser Valley was hit by that atmospheric river in 2021. Now, current Abbotsford Mayor Ross Siemens has said that the city is monitoring the weather closely, given the recent drought as well and heavy rains that are forecast. But joining us now is the managing editor of the Fraser Valley Current, Tyler Olson. Tyler, hello, good afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I understand you're in Lillooet right now, but what are you hearing about the weather in the Fraser Valley?
The rain has started in the Fraser Valley, as I think it has most places in the lower mainland, and I think we can expect it to move east, as the day progresses and start to dump have heavy amounts of rain. Exactly how much, though, is always hard to tell. It's hard to predict precipitation amounts.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll know at the end of the event. As we have heard from Environment Canada, this atmospheric river will be much weaker than the one that caused that devastating flooding in the Fraser Valley in November 2021. But of course, when people hear even those words, right, these memories are stirred up and people think about, well, what does that mean? Then are we looking at a similar situation? What kind of impact has 2021 had on cities like Abbotsford and Hope in terms of how to prepare for these kinds of weather events?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest impacts so far has just been the awareness that these events can and will happen, and that they occur fairly regularly, and they have to, cities and municipalities and governments have to be prepared and should proactively prepare too. In 2021, we saw that that massive atmospheric river take seemingly communities like Abbotsford and Hope and the province itself by surprise. And we saw highways remain open probably longer than they would today if a similar atmospheric river was bearing down. You mentioned them proactively closing Highway 1 in the Fraser Canyon, and that's something we didn't see before the 2021 atmospheric river.
It's interesting too, the consideration that's being given to the drought, which it seems incongruent with what we're seeing right now, but ongoing drought and what impact that's had on the soil, right, in terms of how well it's able to absorb moisture and rain.
Yeah, there's a lot of different factors that go into events like this. And as the province mentioned, something like the wildfire in the summer can have impacts in during the fall and winter when rain starts to fall on ground that can't absorb it anymore. You see the same thing in places like, or on mountains like Mount Baker, where a lot of the rain that falls there feeds into the Nooksack River, and that's what flooded Abbotsford's Sumas Prairie. And so the snow level on that mountain can impact just how much water that falls on that mountain reaches the Nooksack and then potentially has the ability to impact Canada.
There has been some cross coordination since then between Washington State and NBC, and when it comes to rivers overflowing and the Nooksack River concerns, of course, are there any concerns this time around?
It doesn't seem so.
Okay.
I think people need to keep in mind that these events happen regularly. It's just the fact that once in a while they will be larger than expected, or they will just the odds stack up, and eventually one will happen that has a potential to do real damage. So I think there's a lot of people can tend to panic about these things, maybe more so than they should. But that panic also has a preparatory effect where you become more prepared to react when something does happen. I think we've seen with the governments, they're much more prepared now than they were 2 years ago. But we also saw how they can, over time, become less so as they get further and further from an event.
We did request Mayor Siemens on the program. He wasn't available, but the city of Abbotsford sent us their statement around this. They're monitoring the weather closely right now, also participating in calls with the province's emergency management and climate readiness team. And they talk about how in the Claiborne Creek and other low-lying areas, they are monitoring things there. You can report localized flooding to their website and the @Abbotsford app, or you can call after hours 604-864-5552. They have sand and sandbag materials available. They've also made permanent repairs to the Sumas Dike that were completed last year, as well as the Beartown pump station was raised. So it sounds like a lot of preparation. What impact has 2021 had on the community? From I remember that you've put out you covered the flooding quite in depth and the effect on agriculture and the communities there. What is the long-lasting impact of it?
Yeah, I think at this point there's obviously the people who are very directly affected, and many of them are still repairing their lives and rebuilding.
Yeah.
I think for the larger community who may have been more peripherally affected, it's the awareness that they live in a place that is susceptible to these events and that they need to be prepared. It's also an awareness that the transportation networks that many people rely on are not nearly as robust as we may have thought. We saw earlier, just a couple of weeks ago, we saw Highway 1 between Hope and Chilliwack closed during an atmospheric river a little bit like this one. So there's still impacts that can happen even during lower stage events like this one, and it reinforces the need to be aware that those impacts can happen and be prepared to deal with them when they do.
What about the farming communities, Tyler? What, in terms of your coverage, what have you seen has recovery been like?
Yeah, it really depends too on exactly where farmers were located, what types of crops they were growing. Some have seemed to bounce back quite well. Others have taken longer to replant crops and deal with that sort of thing. We've also had effects with colder winters and many of the weather-related impacts that farmers always have to deal with.
I know you're in Lillooet right now. Did you do anything to prepare your home for the rains?
Well, where I'm now, I'm at a family member's home. Luckily, it's not in a problematic area, but
Mm,
as you mentioned, the highway connecting Lillooet to the rest of the Fraser
right.
Valley, where I'm going to need to be very soon, is closed. So I'm going to have to take that into consideration and watch that closely.
Yeah.
That highway was proactively closed earlier in November and it reopened without much trouble. And
Hmm.
so I'm going to hope that it's reopened again pretty soon here. But just like many others, it's keeping an eye on the highways and the road networks and
Yeah.
taking things as they come.
You're staying put tonight, I take it.
Yes.
Yeah. Tyler,
I think actually that's a good point. I think one of the things we saw in 2021 is when the rain started falling, you had highways closed and then people rerouted on unfamiliar
yes.
highways that were then impacted by landslides. And one thing I think individuals can take into consideration is that when they see or hear of a landslide happening in one area, it's probably best to stay where they are and see how it shakes out in other transportation routes.
There was a lot of traveling at that time as well. We opened up the phone lines the day after because I remember it happened on a Sunday. We opened up the phone lines on the Monday, and yeah, a lot of people were stuck on the highways because they had been traveling. So perhaps with these proactive decisions being made now, people may be more apt to stay away from any kind of long drives along those highways. Tyler, safe travels to you when you go home. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Tyler Olson is the editor of the Fraser Valley Current. We are asking you, what are your questions about this atmospheric river event? And if you've made any kinds of preparations to your home, if you're seeing heavy rains out there, you can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. And you can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. And joining me now is CBC's climate and science specialist, Darius Madavi. Hello, Darius.
Hello.
We were talking wildfires just a few months ago here on the program. What about this rainfall? How would you describe this event that is hitting the South Coast right now?
I would say significant but short-lived. This isn't going to be a multi-day atmospheric river, which we've seen before, but today and into overnight tonight towards tomorrow, we are going to see some very significant rainfall, looking at the triple digits even for some areas, both on the island and here in the lower mainland.
Okay. And so what are the risks then when it comes to flooding?
So the River Forecast Center has put in place several flood watches, primarily for the lower mainland and then up the Sunshine Coast. And then there are some high stream flow advisories across all of Vancouver Island and over in the southeast, over in the Kootenays. So be prepared for the possibility of some flooding. Given the drought conditions that we've had, the soil is not going to be able to absorb as much moisture as it usually does. So expect that we could see those impacts there. Now, I think it's worth mentioning that last week we had a very dry week, a week and a half or so,
Yes.
with no rain at all. And we saw that the drought levels for the South Coast, which had been back down to zero because we had been getting some decent precipitation this fall, jumped back up a level. And so that really underscores how severe those underlying drought conditions are, that just a week without rain can put us back up a drought level. So even though our drought levels are back down now, we're at drought level 1, the underlying conditions are still there, so we just won't be able to see the soil and the reservoirs soak up as much water as they usually would this time of year. So the impacts could be worse than they usually would be at this time of year, getting an event like this.
Without that drought. And it has continued in other parts of the province, like the Northeast,
Yes.
Is that right?
The Northeast is still at a drought level 5, which I should emphasize is unheard of for this time of year.
Wow.
Seeing that level of drought is really incredible. It's not something that you'd expect whatsoever. All throughout the southern interior as well, we have fairly high drought levels, and those have not budged at all in recent weeks. But really, the Northeast still being at a drought level 5 is the big worrisome factor, especially as we head into next year.
Any precipitation expected there?
It doesn't look like too much. We might see some rain break into that part of the province later this week. But for right now, it doesn't look like we're going to see anything significant, I would say, up there. The moisture is mostly being confined to the north coast, central coast, south coast, and then we're going to see that push into the interior as significant snowfall today. And then as temperatures start to rise, because this atmospheric river isn't just bringing moisture, it's bringing heat as well. So we'll see temperatures come up as that makes its way into the interior. So expect snow today and a bit more rain tomorrow.
Yeah, keep that in mind. Winter weather as well, right?
Yes.
In some parts of the province. So keep that in mind for our listeners and audience in the Peace region. Up in Fort St. John, still at drought level 5, and looking at possibly some precipitation later this week. Hopefully that helps you out. We are talking about this, the heavy rain being brought to southwestern BC by an atmospheric river event. The Environment Canada saying it's not going to be as strong. It'll be much weaker than the one that caused that unprecedented flooding in the Fraser Valley 2 years ago, November 2021. But people are being advised to have those emergency plans in place to clear the culverts at your home. What are your tips for people to prepare then, Darius?
Like you said, clearing culverts is very important to make sure that that water has somewhere to go. Just be vigilant, be aware of what might be coming. Once we get through today, things will improve considerably. It's overnight tonight that might be a concern. So just be prepared tonight. Also, to keep a watch for flooding, make sure you check your basement frequently, and wherever else you might expect to see flooding in your home. But I think travel will be the big one. And until we hear about potential flooding, I'd say it's not as high a risk as it is during some of the other events like this. We're on a flood watch over the Lower Mainland and only high stream flood advisories in other places. So don't be too anxious about this happening, but be aware of those potential updates, because things could get worse pretty rapidly if we see significant rainfall show up in certain places.
Okay, just an ounce of preparation.
Yes.
If you have any questions as well for how atmospheric rivers behave, we're also looking at a king tide event. So if you have any weather-related questions for Darius, he's more than able to answer them. So you can call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 as well. And this is happening as there is an additional warning for high ocean water levels, and at the same time, a semi-annual king tide. How do those exacerbate things?
Right. So this warning just came down a few minutes ago now, the high water levels one. So still
good.
expect high water levels.
Okay.
We are still during a king tide event, but it's not as much of a concern as it was. That being said, these high winds that usually accompany atmospheric river and are accompanying it this time, especially because we have wind warnings in place for the North Island up to the North Coast, including everything between there as well. Expect that we could see some significant impacts. Localized coastal flooding is possible. Again, because that warning has come down now, it seems like Environment Canada doesn't expect it to be as severe as it could have been otherwise. But be prepared for those high winds. Be careful if you're in a coastal area, because it could come up significantly further than it usually would, because winds are expected to be gusting close to 100 kilometers per hour, especially up by Haida Gwaii.
Okay. And in Vancouver, they say they've been removing debris from shorelines, adding sandbags, and reinforcing the seawall as well. How do you compare this weather event, the kind of weather that we're seeing right now, as you said, in the Northeast, it's unprecedented to be in that drought level 5 for this time of year. How do you compare what we're seeing now to previous years? What role might climate change be playing in the kind of weather we're seeing?
Yes, so this severe fluctuation of drought and extremely wet weather, that is very characteristic of climate change in general. You'd expect there to be more precipitation as we see warmer temperatures, but it's very much, the problem with this is that it really changes where we'd expect to see those events. So it's not so much that we're seeing different weather, it's where we're seeing that different weather. I should say that the drought conditions that we're seeing across the province are still being carried over from last fall when we saw a significant drought throughout September and into October.
Right.
Things improved, and then they got a lot worse again at the end of November. And we still felt those impacts at the beginning of this year. And that's part of why we've had such an extreme wildfire season. And so now, seeing drought level 5 still in the northeast, where we'd expect to see more fires next year, seeing it throughout the southern interior, sets us up for a really bad drought season again next year, unless things change, unless we get really favorable conditions, and carryover of the current wildfire of our wildfire situation this year into next year. Again, zombie fires could be a big concern in the northeast, especially if we don't have any rain to start to extinguish those. They will continue to smolder under the ground and then pop up again next year.
What is a zombie fire?
Zombie fire. A zombie fire is a fire that continues to smolder underneath the duff, underneath the top layers of the ground over the winter, and then they return at the beginning of the next fire season. And so some people, experts were saying that we might have double zombie fires. So zombie fires that continue this year into next year, and then again into the following year, because that's how severe fires like Donnie Creek were this year.
Wow. Darius, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And you're going to stick around. You've obviously been such a great resource for us as our climate and science specialist here at CBC Vancouver, CBC BC, but you got to participate in a big day at CBC on Friday. Producer Ann Penman, who looks over all of that event, is here with us now. How was your first food bank day with us?
Oh, I loved Food Bank Day. It was so fun. I got to wear a Santa hat all day, and there's nothing better than that. A really great way, December 1st, to get into the holiday spirit. And what a successful Food Bank Day it was.
It sure was. I know you shared some science over how it feels and how it benefits people to give and what it means to them psychologically. And we had a lot of that. Ann Penman is the producer of CBC BC Food Bank Day. Last Friday, of course, was this 37th annual CBC British Columbia Food Bank Day, raising money for food banks around the province. Our show was a 3-hour edition of BC Today and North by Northwest with the fabulous Margaret Gallagher. And Ann Penman is here now to talk about what's being raised, how much has been raised, and what that all goes to, how important it is that your generosity is shared. And hello.
Hello, Michelle.
How was Friday for you?
Oh, Friday was fantastic. I was mostly in the phone room.
Yes.
A couple of floors underground. We had about 60 volunteers over the course of the day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Lots of people from food banks around the province came and helped out in the phone room. Lots of other people as well.
Yeah.
It's just bustling nonstop action.
It really is.
Down there for sure. And I know it is in 700 as well.
Oh, it was buzzing. We had a wonderful, small, intimate audience, but their energy was just so fantastic. They kept it up through the 3 hours. We had a great band, Jack Gordon and the Holiday Spirits, and other performers as well. Really wonderful, passionate guests who talked about what it meant to them, right, to be there for Food Bank Day. What did you hear from people? Because it's hard on everybody, right? Inflation and the impact of the economy. What was prompting them to give, even if they were struggling themselves?
I think people generally who called were just kind, generous people. And some of them said that they couldn't give as much as they gave in previous years. Some said that they had a heightened awareness they had never given before, but they had a heightened awareness of how people are struggling now, and they felt they wanted to do something. One woman called and made a donation of $50, and she said that it was the smallest amount she had ever donated, and she was apologizing for that. And of course, $50 is a lot of money, actually. So after she got off the phone, I asked the head of food banks, the Greater Vancouver Food Bank Society, I told him the story, and he said, you know what, $50, they can double the buying power of $50 that you or I could spend. And so that would buy 90 pounds of fresh apples.
Wow.
So it would give 90 families
goes a long
potentially
way.
a pound or 45 families 2 pounds of apples. So $50 does go a long way.
And that goes to the theme, right? Give a little bit, because every little bit counts. And as you say, it can be doubled by the food bank itself. Why don't you do the honors? We have the total here on screen behind me. So if you're watching our live stream, you'll see it here. But Ann Penman, do the honors of reading
I'd
the
love
latest
the drum roll for
total.
this one. $1,648,372.71. A remarkable number.
It is remarkable, and that does mean every little bit, give a little bit, counts and makes such a big difference. And you've been doing this for 37 years. Do you get over it ever?
No, it's a tremendous privilege.
Yeah, it really is. And I can see that you're getting a little emotional. But this is, it's remarkable to see the generosity of our audience. Thank you so much for participating and sending whatever you can. And thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Ann Penman is the producer of CBC British Columbia's Food Bank Day. She's the creator of it as well. And my thanks to Darius Madavi. Always good to have you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. That's Darius Madavi, CBC's climate and science specialist. It's 12:31 now, 1:31 in the Mountain Time Zone. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thanks for joining us. And again, thanks for your donations. This is BC Today here on CBC. We are on CBC Radio 1, 88.1 FM in Metro Vancouver. We're live streaming too on the CBC News app. You can also watch us on GEM, cbc.ca/BC, and on YouTube at the CBC Vancouver page. And coming up in our next half hour, we will talk about grief over the holidays and how we can cope, what supports are available. That's coming up after the CBC News Update with Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. The National Council of Canadian Muslims says it is deeply concerned about an incident in Victoria yesterday where a man in a vehicle swerved toward and nearly hit a protester at a pro-Palestinian event. Victoria police say the man was arrested and released pending a future court date. The emergency department at the hospital in Clearwater is temporarily closed until 7 o'clock tonight. Interior Health is blaming a shortage of nurses. Anyone needing urgent care is advised to visit Royal Inland in Kamloops. And heavy rain, strong winds and high tides have prompted a series of weather warnings or advisories from Environment Canada. Meanwhile, Highway 1 south of Lytton will be closed tonight at 7 o'clock due to heavy rain and possibly snow. The province says the decision stems from concerns about unstable ground from a summer wildfire. A decision about when it will reopen will be made after geotechnical assessments tomorrow. And taking a look at the forecast, the rainfall warnings continue for several areas, including inland Vancouver Island, Howe Sound, and sections of Highway 3. Winter storm warnings are in place for the North and West Columbia, as well as Kinbasket, and wind warnings are in effect for Haida Gwaii, the North and Central Coast, as well as North Vancouver Island. Elsewhere, highs up to 5 and mainly cloudy in the Peace. In the central interior, flurries and showers with a high of 3 degrees. Highs to 0 with snow in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, rain and light snow with a high of 3. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, lots of rain this afternoon with highs around 11. I'll have more local news at the top of the hour. Now back to Michelle with BC Today.
Thank you very much, Rob. That's Rob Zimmerman in our CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back here with BC Today here on CBC Radio 1, live streaming on the CBC News app, CBC GEM, and on YouTube. You can just search for CBC Vancouver. Good to have you with us. I'm Michelle Eliot. And a note that this next discussion will have talk of death and grieving. The holidays are not a happy time for everyone, especially those who are grieving the loss of a loved one. There are bereavement resources to help, and the demand for them has grown over recent years. You can contact your local hospice society or the BC Bereavement Helpline. Toll free, you can reach them at 1-877-779-2223. In Vancouver, the number is 604-738-9950. And as you may know, Canada's new mental health line is also now running. You can just call or text 988. Abhishek Nanjundapa lost his father more than 2 years ago. He has been participating in a bereavement support event that's run by the Vancouver Hospice Society called Coping Through the Holidays.
My dad passed away during COVID time. I was trying to finish my graduate degree around the same time. I struggled to finish it. I had counseling session at the SFU. But as soon as I graduated, I had no more option for doing this counseling service at SFU, and my counselor suggested to reach out to Vancouver Hospice, and that led me to first come to the Coping with Holidays thing, and then later on had a counseling sessions, the free counseling sessions, 6 sessions. Now I also do walking group stuff. I'm also, whenever I feel comfortable, I want to give back to, be a volunteer at some point. Depends on myself and my counselors when they say it's appropriate. I want to do that.
That is Abhishek Nanjan Dapa, who is participating in bereavement counseling supports over the holidays run by the Vancouver Hospice Society. We'd like to ask you, what supports do you find helpful to cope with grief during the holiday season? How do you deal with your grief? And do you have any special traditions to remember a loved one at this time? We're going to make space for this conversation this half hour. You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can dial pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, you can share your thoughts and your stories as well. That's bctoday@cbc.ca. I have two guests joining me for this conversation. Lisa Hartley is a ceremony officiant and grief support, and Margaret Fletcher is a registered clinical counselor. Good afternoon to you both. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Margaret, what goes through your mind as you listen to Abhishek and the kinds of feelings he had and the supports that he sought?
I think it's great to know that he got some support, and it's nice for people to know, because not everyone listening today is probably from Vancouver, that your local hospice society is a good place to check, or other organizations like ours, the Lumara Grief and Bereavement Care Society, for supports around the holidays or at any time. So, and I just think the ability to meet with other folks that are experiencing the same thing and to share ideas on coping is excellent.
Lisa is nodding and really agreeing with you there. What are the feelings that the holidays can stir up for someone who has experienced loss?
Oh, so many big things can be stirred up.
Yeah.
I would say the first thing is just exhaustion. When you're grieving, you're very tired. And as we were talking earlier, the holidays bring on a lot of extra work. So you already have an extra part-time job.
Right.
Getting ready for them, and then adding on that load of grief would be exhaustion.
I imagine there's
Exhausting.
a lot of, to that exhaustion, a lot of pressure to put up a front as well for others.
Yeah. I think Christmas there's so many feelings around Christmas that it needs to be perfect somehow, that we
Right.
have to create a perfect Christmas. And it goes on so much longer than all the holidays through the year when you're grieving are hard, but Christmas goes on for such a long time. And I think there can be really mixed feelings, even sometimes guilt if you're enjoying parts of the holiday, profound sadness, of course, missing the person, and maybe some guilt if there's a bit of relief if the person was a difficult person sometime to spend time with at the holidays, and that can be hard.
Oh, there's a lot of
A lot of different feelings.
yeah, and difficult and complicated. Yeah. We are taking your calls. You can let us know, what are the supports that have helped you in coping with grief, especially during the holiday season, because as we've heard, so many pressures, so much exhaustion. It is a holiday that goes on for a long time. What is the support that you need? How do you make space for your grief? And you can let us know as well. We're going to talk a bit about how you can honor your loved one during the holidays. You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. If you prefer to email, our email address is bctoday@cbc.ca. Roman is joining us from Port Alberni. Hi, Roman. Good to hear from you.
Hi, good day to you. Thank you for this important talk you're having today.
Take your time.
It's coming up on a year for my dad. December 30th last year.
Wow.
And it makes it tough. Makes it tough for the Christmas holidays. But I think when your question is what kind of supports work, and I was telling your producer about this, patience and empathy are pretty much the best ingredients to take to someone who is amidst a sea of grief. And I also shared that sometimes, despite our best intentions, we sometimes look like the bad guy when we're trying to pull someone to grief. Trying to make them feel better because it makes us more comfortable. And I was so good at this myself. I tried to talk about all the wonderful things that countered grief, that made pain go away or made happiness worthwhile.
Right.
And it's like trying to convince someone who doesn't eat mushrooms that mushrooms are good for them.
Yeah.
They either have the taste for it or they don't. And in that moment, I'm projecting what I want onto a grieving person, and that's just for me.
Yeah.
And it's not empathetic. It's sympathetic to a degree, but it's to me, as someone who's grieving, not of any use right now. So I think any good friends, family that can and dare to bring your best set of patience and best set of empathetic skills to sit, be still, and just be a light for someone who kind of is in a sea of grief and has to navigate it themselves. And I think sometimes fun stories come along that help. And being able to read again empathetically what the tide is doing, you kind of give yourself a chance to learn from someone's experience vicariously. And I really hope that by having an open hand and open eyes, you can prepare yourself for when this comes for you. Because I think as a species, we willfully and subconsciously do not look at death because we know it's there. We know for the price of life is to die. And then the price of love is to grieve when we lose those that we love. So I think we're so adept at denying ourselves the things that we need to see that when the time comes, it's a thunderbolt out of the blue. And, sometimes for something to heal properly, you just give it the time, the space, and the patience to make the feelings be shown, to make the feelings be known, and then to let them be let go.
Eloquent as always, Roman. I'm so sorry that you lost your father less than a year ago.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for calling. You take care. I hope that you're okay after this call, okay?
And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
I'm going to make it a merry one for him.
You're going to make it a merry one for him. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing everything you've shared. That's Roman in Port Alberni. He's going to make it a merry one for his father.
That was,
Wasn't it beautiful?
beautifully eloquent.
Yeah, and I appreciate your pain, Roman. Thank you so much for calling despite that.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and there's a certain place where people do encourage us to be happy and merry.
Yeah.
And as I was thinking and coming into this interview, I really thought about how so many of us are walking with loss in different ways, and we've got to carry both those things together, be it the joy that comes with the holidays, the light, the being with friends and the celebrating, and the heaviness of loss, whatever that may look like in our lives. And it's learning ways to integrate that. And I really heard Roman say, sit still and be the light for people.
Yes.
Come together and be present with one another. That's the gift that we can offer.
And I appreciated that he gave a perspective on what others can do. Patience and empathy.
Yeah.
Right? What did you think of that, Margaret?
I absolutely agreed. I thought, well, that's great. Roman can just carry on. He's just told us everything we need to know.
He often
Our job
does.
is done.
But I was also thinking peace can be that all the people that loved the person that you're missing all have their own individual personalities. And I think it's important to mention that even in one family that's had one major loss, they may have very different feelings about how to handle the holidays, and it's not right or wrong. Like one person may think we need to do everything the way that person loved it, and somebody else may say, that's exactly what I can't do because their absence will be bigger. And I would just really encourage families to be curious about their own, what do they need this year that would be helpful for them, and what can they manage between the family to do bits of what works for everyone without thinking that somebody's doing it wrong.
I experienced that the first Christmas after my mom passed as well, was thinking, well, what do I do? Do I step in and be the person, she used to invite people for the big dinner. And so I felt like I had to take that role. But, what can people do to just, to approach that? He said he would make this a merry one for his father. Lisa, what are some ways that people can honor, while they experience and carry that heaviness, honor and celebrate their loved ones?
That's a beautiful question. Thank you. And I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a hard time. I think the thing is, once again, that we do have permission to change things up a bit. There is, as a daughter especially, I imagine, a willingness to want to step in and do that very thing that the missing person did, that your mom did. But we don't necessarily have to do that. We can have permission to do it our way because we're a new generation, a new way of looking at it. And if that means it's takeout, you can do that, right?
Great, okay.
Taken out. But it also means there is, I mean, my training is more in ritual and ceremony.
Yeah.
So you can have a dinner for your mom where you have an empty spot for her at the table. Maybe you cook something that she loved. Maybe you light a candle and you say, okay, we're going to talk about mom on this dinner at this time. And give everyone permission to do that. And then remember to close it, to, blow the candle out and then to do something watch a silly movie or something.
Yes. Lift yourself after that. Yes, go ahead, Margaret. Sounds like
Well, I was going to say, just to add to some of those things, you can have a child or children in the family make a special ornament for the tree this year that honors the person. And that idea of a candle, I know people that get quite a large candle at the beginning of the holiday season, and any evening that they're sitting at home, they can light the candle, and it's in memory of that person. It's bringing the light of their life in amongst us, and because it's a cold, dark time, that can be really helpful. Also, giving donations to organizations that the person really liked, if they loved animals or they worked for the environment, giving something in their name can feel like you're including them in your Christmas preparations, even though you wish they were physically present.
And carrying something on, too, that they cared about. In fact, when it comes to those traditions, Barbara wrote us an email from Black Creek. We always set an extra place setting on the table and give a toast to absent friends and families before we start our meal. Yeah. Isn't that lovely, Barbara?
That's beautiful.
Thank you very much. You can let us know, too, if you have a special tradition in honor of a loved one whom you've lost. And how do you honor them during the holidays? And what are the supports that help you cope with your grief during the holiday season? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. Ruth is calling us from Vancouver Island. Hi, Ruth. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you.
What did you want to say about coping with grief during the holidays?
Well, in a 4.5-year period, I lost 10 people out of my immediate circle. And in that time, my daughter was age 4 through 9. And so after we lost the 10th person, that sort of did me in. And one of the people that we lost during that time was my mom. We lost her on Christmas Day. Oh, my goodness. And so I went to the hospice. I called the hospice and I said, look, here's what's happened, and I simply can't cope with this anymore. And they had me come in and speak to one of their counselors, and she ended up having one-on-one sessions with me for almost 8 months. And without her, and without her recommendation that my daughter attend the hospice counseling sessions for children, which is a group session called Touchstones, at least that's what it's called down in Victoria. I don't know where we would be without them, because it was an incredibly challenging time losing so many people in such a short time. And as the counselor explained it to me, that you lost track of even who you were grieving for, because there were so many on top of one another. And for my daughter, to this day, she still remembers going, and she went 3 times. It's an 8-week program. Well, she did the program 3 times. And by the end of the second one, the counselor that was running the children's program came to me and said, this is wonderful, because she's now helping the other children who are coming. Wow. And so I can't say enough great things about the work that hospice does, not only for adults, but for children. Sometimes the children get forgotten in the grief, but they also have feelings that they need to process in a safe space. And sometimes they can do it easier with a stranger, like a counselor, that is trained in that, as opposed to doing with the parent, because they see the parent suffering and they don't want to add to the parent's suffering. So they keep their feelings hidden. But having an outlet for them like hospice offers is just wonderful. And I don't know that I could have survived what we did without hospice. So I just wanted to say thank you and encourage anybody who is suffering from any type of loss to seek them out and seek help for your children.
Wow, unimaginable loss. 10 people in the span of 4 years, and just here to you, right, for seeking that help for yourself and your daughter too, and you see the difference that it has made for her. Ruth, I really appreciate your calling. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All the best to you and your daughter.
Thank you.
I can hear Lisa and Margaret sighing as you're listening there. What did you think?
Well, I think she raised so many important points, and I think that guilt and confusion people can feel when they think I'm grieving so much for my mom. But what about those other 9 people? And our brains just don't allow us to feel intensely about all of that grief all at the same time. So having some gentleness with ourselves and with the family. And the fact that she had her daughter involved, and that's a primary focus of the Lumara Society, as well as working with the whole family, having support for children. And we often find that when children come to some of the groups, they don't necessarily talk about their loss, but they know when they come that all the other children in the room have lost someone special through a death. And so that just makes them feel like these people get it. And so I think that's really, and it's helpful for parents to know that they can be being supported in their own grief and that their children will get the support that they need.
I bet.
It makes a huge difference.
Lisa?
And children grieve very differently than adults. They call them puddle jumpers. They'll grieve and then they're really happy. And they grieve and then it's can be disorienting as a parent who's maybe in bigger grief.
Going through their own.
Yeah, and I don't think people always need to have counseling. There's little things, and that's what we're talking on a bit today, is the ritual and the ceremony. But the ones that do need counseling, I heard her say hospice a number of times, and I'm a big supporter. There is a virtual hospice in Canada that's quite incredible, and if you go on there now, you'll find resources.
And what would they search for? What would people search for?
Virtualhospice.ca.
Virtualhospice.ca. You can find virtualhospice.ca. And other numbers as well. Again, the Canada-wide crisis line, you can call or text 988, just 988. That is available. The BC mental health crisis line is 310-6789, no area code. And the BC bereavement helpline is 1-877-779-2223. And we are showing those numbers on our live stream as well. And you were talking about things people can do for themselves, small things, perhaps if it's not counseling. Kim is joining us in Victoria to talk about some of that. Hi, Kim.
Hi, how are you today?
I am okay. Thanks so much for calling. And what did you want to say about coping with grief?
I've actually recently started a career to help people transition their grief into something maybe more positive. So I've been a glass blower for the last 20 years. And over COVID, I started working on making memorial glass jewelry for people where I can put their ashes inside the glass. I think we're kind of in a different society now where we don't have burials and a place to go and visit our loved ones. So it's just kind of a nice way to be able to offer people a way to keep their loved ones close. And, I've been blowing glass, like I said, for 20 years, and the messages that I receive from the people that I've made these pieces for, it's just so rewarding. And I do always ask for a photo. I do people and pets because we often grieve in our pets as well.
Yes.
And so, it's just a really rewarding thing to do. And it's kind of where a lot of my focus is going because of being able to help people.
Yeah. Is there a message that stands out for you?
Sorry?
Is there a message from someone that stands out for you? You said it's been really rewarding.
Yeah, it's just that as an artist, sometimes I feel like I want to be more helpful in the world. And so I just did a piece for a young lady that lost her budgie bird, and she created this very special bond. And to get a message saying that she really feels the presence and the essence of this little creature that she's grown to love, you know, and I just get messages like that from almost everybody that I've made a piece from. And it's really nice that art can also help us heal. And it's really nice to be able to offer that to people. And I'm really happy that I do that.
What a lovely contribution, Kim. Thank you very much. Just a quick comment from you, Lisa, before I take another call.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's something important when we're grieving. At the beginning of it, it's very challenging, but there is a moment when our own creativity comes forward if we're able to listen. And I think one of the biggest things is to give ourselves permission to do whatever it is, to create something, whether it's a journal or write a card to someone who's passed and hang it on the tree, whatever it is.
Something, again, to memorialize.
Yes.
To remember. Donna is calling in Roberts Creek with an event that you'd like to share. Donna, go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you. Yeah, actually, it comes to mind there are a couple of events. Hospice has come up repeatedly in this conversation, and I'm involved with the Sunshine Coast Hospice Society, and we offer a number of different programs at this time of year specifically to support people who are grieving at a time when everybody expects you to be cheery.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we are doing is a winter tea on December 14th at 1 o'clock at Seaside Center in Seashelt. It's a time that people can get together, share a cup of tea, share some ritual, and remember people at this time of year. And the other one is we have tables in the Gibsons Mall and in the Seashelt Mall where we have cards that people can write a message or a name, hang it on the tree, and have a conversation with a trained hospice volunteer if they need to and would like to. And then on January 1st, we gather on the beach and have a fire, and the messages all are sent up into the air.
Donna, can people go to the website for more information?
They can. Sunshine Coast Hospice Society.
There you go. Donna, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Finally, take care. Margaret, just very quickly, if someone is, bombarded with the cheeriness, the singing and all of that, just a quick tip for how they can stop and be kind to themselves.
Yeah, I think taking a moment just to breathe and to give yourself a chance to just connect with how you are feeling. Another thing I often suggest to people, if they're unsure about going to a lot of events, to have a backup plan. So, for example, to accept an invitation saying, I'd love to come, I can get exhausted and overwhelmed. So if I need to leave early, please understand that I'm very pleased that I was able to come, but don't worry that, so that then if they do, they might be the last ones to leave.
Yeah.
But they might act on that.
Yeah. Really useful advice. Again, the BC Bereavement Hotline, 1-877-779-2223. Take care.